Okay, here we are. UFC 281. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira, as well as Carla Esparza versus Weili Zhang and Poirier versus Chandler. After an amazing pay-per-view with UFC 280, UFC delivered again in MSG as they always do. And yeah, a very good card this one. I wouldn't say it's maybe as strong as the UFC 280 card was. A lot of people feel like that one didn't really deliver considering what it had, but I still think it was pretty decent. But on paper, those fights were fantastic. But these ones are very good as well. If you look at the prelims, specifically, you got Dominic Reyes versus Ryan Spawn. You've also got Brad Riddell and Renato Moicano. Some four prelim fights, some very very interesting fights. And then going up, obviously, you got Dan Hooker competing. You've got Frankie Edver, Chris Gutierrez, Hooker against Claudio Pulis. And then obviously you got the big ones, the Poirier Chandler, the Esparza Zhang, and the Adesanya Pereira. Now, I will mainly be focusing on the three sort of quote unquote big fights, I guess, of the card in Poirier Chandler, Esparza Zhang, and Pereira and Adesanya. So, starting off, we have Dustin Poirier versus Marco Chandler, a very, very big fight in the lightweight division. For Dustin Poirier, the last time he competed, obviously, was his loss to Charles Oliveira. Before that, he had his rookie win against Conor McGregor, and then before that, he obviously had the legitimate win against Conor McGregor. So, pretty decent last few years. It's actually funny if you look at it. Since Poirier has beat or got lost to Charles Oliveira, Oliveira's competed twice against Gaethje and Makhachev. So, side note, but it says a lot about how great Oliveira was in terms of staying active, and I think that's why he probably needs a break now. But amazing from Oliveira. And for Poirier, not much activity, which you kind of expect. Poirier's at a point, I feel, where he almost is only chasing the big money fights. He actively chose to pursue McGregor rubber match instead of going after the belt, and wasn't really good or bad decision because he would have fought Oliveira regardless, and he lost to him in the end. So I don't think much would have changed regardless of if he took it then or not. But yeah, an interesting fight this one. And then when you got Michael Chandler, obviously his last fight was that ridiculous knockout of Tony Ferguson, the front kick to the face. Then before that, he had his war with Justin Gaethje. He then had his obviously his loss in the title fight to Charles Oliveira, and then had his debut against Dan Hooker. So, say what about Chandler, he has thrown himself into the fight. The fact that you have fought Hooker in your first fight, Oliveira your second, Gaethje third, Ferguson fourth, and now Dustin Poirier. He's really fought the who's who of lightweight. I think the only guy who's really missing, you got Dariush, but in terms of actually, I put Dariush in there. He hasn't fought Dariush, and he hasn't fought Makhachev, who's obviously the champion. If you take them and McGregor maybe, but McGregor's a bit more in and out of his division at the moment. But he really has fought everybody Chandler, and I think it's to be commended. And I think in all those fights, in the Hooker fight, he just blasted him out. In Oliveira fight, I think he did better than, take Makhachev out. I think he did better than how Poirier and Gaethje did against Oliveira. He hurt him, took him down. He somehow survived Oliveira when Oliveira was on his back, which says a lot about not just his wrestling, but his grappling. The fact that he was able to get out of that, because Gaethje was hurt and wasn't able to survive Oliveira on his back. Neither did Poirier, and says a lot about, I think, Chandler's confidence in his wrestling. I think out of the likes, that sort of trio of Gaethje, Poirier, and Chandler, I think Chandler is, to me, by far the best grappler out of the three. Poirier doesn't really use his grappling unless he has to. You saw that a little bit in the McGregor fights where he kind of mixed it in, but doesn't really use it that much. And then with Gaethje, it's non-existent. He said himself he's more of a defensive wrestler, and even then he's not that fantastic at that from what you've seen, because you can have great wrestling credentials in college, but transitioning it to mixed martial arts is a completely different ballgame, and I think for Gaethje doesn't really translate that well. But Chandler very good though, and this is a very big fight. I think for both of these guys, they both Poirier's coming off a loss and Chandler's coming off a win, but they both fought for the belt, and really I think the division is almost starved of some new contenders, and I wouldn't really want to see either of these two fight for the belt, not straight away anyway. I think out of all of them, I think if Chandler beats Poirier, he could have a good argument, because Dustin's fought for the belt twice to Khabib and to Oliveira lost, same with Gaethje. So I think with Chandler you'd have someone new in there, and he only fought for about once, and let's not get twisted. It was close fight. So you can make an argument, I think, for Chandler to fight for the belt. But yeah, I think this fight though is a big one, and a lot of people seem to be favouring Dustin Poirier, and naturally it does make sense. He's the better boxer, the better striker out of the two. Chandler, I could see Poirier really utilising that low kick that he used it against very well against McGregor, because Chandler's very, very heavy on that sort of front leg. It would make sense for him to utilise that, but I do think with Chandler, he did right against Gaethje, sort of trying to stop those kicks coming in. He would move his leg, but eventually when he started getting dragged into a wall, that's where it became an issue. That's where his legs started getting beat up. I think with Poirier, if that happens, I just can see sort of a similar thing happening. So I think in terms of what Chandler needs to do in this one, I think he needs to be smart in this one and really just play it, not play it safe. I think be tactical in this one, almost step in and out of range. Don't get dragged into a fight with Poirier. Land the takedowns when the opportunity arises, land the big power shots when it arises. Don't just go rushing in and trying to knock his head off, because he will knock you out then, Poirier. He's he's one of the best boxers, I'd say, in the UFC, if not the best. So I think for, like I said, I think it's just being more methodical. And against Tony Ferguson, he actually did alright. And people, you got knocked down, and people kind of look at that as the whole picture, really, of what's happened in that fight. But Chandler was doing well. It was just up to the knockdown where he kind of struggled. And Tony Ferguson is very long as well. I think that's why Chandler seems to struggle when he gets caught a lot on the end of punches. Like you look at Oliveira, he caught him right on the end. He hasn't got the natural defense of what a boxer would, because obviously his background's a wrestler, so it's one of them. But yeah, I think for Chandler just being smart, maybe I think jabbing to the body a little bit with Poirier. I think if you can kind of do the whole thing of mixing up your striking and your grappling. Maybe you throw an overhand right, like you're going to knock him out, which Poirier will be expecting, and then you shoot. And I think Chandler will be able to take him down. Chandler's a very, very, very big lightweight, so I think it's definitely doable for him. And I think just doing that would be the smart tactic. And I think for Poirier, I think just doing what you do normally, to be honest. I think if you can drag Chandler into a fight, it definitely would benefit you, because he's better at picking his shots. We saw Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, whenever he's Max Holloway as well. Whenever he's forced into a scrap, Poirier hits very hard, and I think that will be the deciding factor anytime, because he's a very, very big lightweight as well. Poirier's got more of a broader build, whereas Chandler's just more muscular. But either way, they're both very big for the weight. And so then when it comes into my prediction for this fight, this big lightweight clash, very close to an extent. A lot of people seem to be going with Dustin, and it makes sense. He's the better boxer out of the two, and you can make an argument even to say maybe he's the more well-rounded. I know it sounds crazy because Chandler's a good grappler and uses it, but I don't know, Poirier, his striking game's a bit more like Chandler. I know he knocked Tony out with the front kick, but even he said he was surprised that landed. It's very much just trying to land that big overhand, a little bit like how Tyron Woodley used to do it back in the day, but a bit more movement, not backing up as much. So I think for Chandler, just trying to utilise that wouldn't be the smartest thing, trying to just land that big shot. I think for Poirier, again, he does mix some. Occasionally he throws, low kicks. He doesn't really throw head kicks, to be honest, or body kicks, to be honest, that much. But I think, again, both of these guys at a similar point in their career, both battle worn, and I think in terms of what I think will happen in this fight, I do understand the pick of Poirier, because I think anytime he's come up against a guy like a Chandler, I know he's fought Chandler yet, but I'm saying the Gaethjes, the Chan, people like a Chandler, like an Eddie Alvarez, they're kind of in the same mould. He's beat them all. And I think he definitely does have something whenever he fights these sort of big grapplers or big brawlers, even not grapplers, who can grapple a bit, to be fair. Whenever he fights these guys, he just seems to have the edge. But I don't know, I think Chandler gets this one done in the second round, to be honest. I think he'll mix up the grappling and the striking. I think he'll be very methodical, very smart in there, and I can just see him landing something when Poirier maybe is up against the fence and just knocking him down and then finishing him off with the ground and power. A little bit like how we finished Dan Hooker, to be honest. I think Poirier is, like I said, either way, you could pick. I don't think it's a pick-em fight. I think you definitely maybe would favour Poirier because of his experience and his time in the octagon, but I just think that I think Chandler would just get this one done. I know it's kind of against the grain, a lot of people will pick Poirier, but I just feel like he's got something there where I feel like he's got confidence after that knockout of Tony, and I just think that with Poirier, if you can sort of surprising if you can. When you have this threat of grappling and striking, it helps. And I think Chandler needs to utilize that a lot more, because that's when you can catch people by surprise with that big right hand of his. So yeah, I think Michael Chandler gets this one done and gets it done the second round. I think, like I said, overhand right against the fence. I think Poirier drops, and I think he finishes off with the ground and pound. And after that, if they don't make the Volkanovski fight, I could see them making the Chandler and Makhachev, because there is a little bit of beef there, not a lot. And with the with Dariush, maybe in the picture, I'd love to see that fight, but I don't think they'll do that. I think, with Chandler, if he just makes enough noise, he'll probably get the shot. Should the Volkanovski fight not happen, that'd be a fight actually I'd be interested in. Volkanovski and Chandler, two small guys but very, very big builds. So tell you what, if Volkanovski, regardless of what happens at 145, if he moves up, that would be a fight I'd love to see. But either way, I think Chandler gets this one done, and I think for Poirier as well, probably just focus more on the money fights. Colby's been calling him out. I think him and Colby would be for a while. He's been doing it, to be fair, but I think him and Colby would be a good one. Still in the picture, doesn't it? I just feel like I just have a feeling. I think Chandler will get this one done. I think he'll be smarter this time than what he's been in the last few times. He doesn't strike me as just as a guy who just wants to go out there and have wars. Chandler, he does strike me as a smart guy. Like, for example, how he broke down his loss to Oliveira. I think he knows his strengths and weaknesses, but I just feel, and I feel like this one he will get it done. So yeah, Chandler, second round KO/TKO. And then moving up the card, we have Carla Esparza versus Weili Zhang. So starting off with the challenger, Weili, she obviously scored that crazy spinning back fist KO of Joanna Jędrzejczyk in the second round of their rematch, which was a spectacular knockout. And for Carla Esparza, we had that absolute firecracker of a fight against Rose Namajunas, which probably rivals the likes of Lewis and Ngannou and likes of a Woodley Damien Maia. Is one of the most boring fights I've ever seen. But, and when I say boring, I'm not like one of these who hates fights who are tactical, but that fight was, it was like, how do I explain it? Sometimes fighters will throw a lot of feints and just not throw anything. It was almost like two fighters doing that, and it wasn't a great one at all. But fair enough, Carla probably did deserve to win the fight, and now against Weili, I think for Carla Esparza, she's been fighting for quite a while. She's 35 and Weili's 33, so there isn't really only 2 years in age, but Carla's been in the UFC for a while, and I was happy for her when she won the bout. I think, it was nice to see. I think she wore it down when she got married as well, which was cool. But yeah, I do think in this one, I think she's going to struggle. I look at Weili, and I think if you look at her loss, the 2 losses that she had to Rose. First one, I think was a flash KO. A little bit like what happened in Joanna fight. I don't think Rose, if they fought like 10 times, I think Rose only lands that once or twice. I don't think she'll land it a lot of times. But I think Zhang Weili kind of made the mistake. I think she kind of just stood right in front, didn't use a lot of movement. She was utilizing a lot of low kicks, but I just think just one of those things, she just got caught, and I think that's what it was. In the second fight, however, very, very competitive, and a lot of people felt like Weili won the fight. I don't. I think Rose did enough. I think it was 3-2. I had it. But with Weili, though, she utilised a lot of grappling, and there's that video going around of her picking up Francis Ngannou, which I know, like, there are a lot of people who have deceptive strength, but the fact that she could pick up Francis tells you a lot, that she's very, very strong. And in this fight, she's been working with Cejudo. Like, it's as if she's almost utilised a lot more than grappling, which I think is smart, because she's a very good striker, and I think I could just see in this fight her utilising her grappling. I don't think Carla's a much better grappler than her, really. Carla's good, don't get twisted, but I don't think there's just not the sharpness on the feet or on the ground, which I think Weili has. So yeah, I personally, I can just see Weili out grappling her for like a round 2, and then I can see her maybe dropping her, or maybe just taking her down again in the round 2, and maybe then I could see her just landing a lot of ground and pound. Look, I don't ever count fights. I think Carla could definitely get it done. She could catch her. With women's MMA, it's very unpredictable. Not MMA in general is unpredictable, but I feel like when you look at the likes of Juliana Pena against Nunes, not a lot of people gave her a chance. Neither did I, but she got it done. I know she got destroyed in the rematch, but it shows you that, sometimes things don't always go the way you feel it will go, and some fights can surprise you. Like, it's a weird example, but Brunson hasn't got great striking, but he was able to knock down Cane, who I think is a much better striker. Like, sometimes things just don't make sense in MMA, and Could I see Carla just knocking her down or knocking her out or taking her back and taking her back and submitting her? I could see, but I can't really see her knocking her down. But I won't be again. I'm not surprised by anything in this sport. It's amazing, but yeah. But I'm kind of alluding to the fact that I just think Whaley will get this one done. I think what will happen, she'll light her up a little bit on the feet. I think Carla will shoot for the takedown. I think Whaley will sprawl it very well. I think she'll show a lot of improvement in grappling, and I think she'll take her down about, say, to the middle end of the first round. And I think she'll show her superiority. I think she'll land ground and pound, and then in the second round, I can see like Carla throwing like a blind kick and Whaley just catching it, taking it down, and then just landing enough ground and pound and scoring the TKO. And to me, I think Whaley made some mistakes in the two Rose fights, but I feel like she's looked. I feel like, I don't know, she strikes me as a fighter who's learnt from those mistakes. She seems to be someone who's always working, always in the gym, trains very hard. So yeah, I think Whaley will get this one done. No, I don't think. Again, Carla can get done, but I just think Whaley's got too much. And I also feel like when you win the belt, especially at the age Carla has, is there that motivation to keep defending? I don't know if there is, to be honest. But either way, there should be a somewhat of an interesting fight. I think Whaley would just be too quick and just too spry. It's probably the word I would use for this one. So yeah, I think Whaley though gets it done and wins her. She becomes a 2-time world champion in the UFC. And the strawweight rankings are interesting. I don't know if Rose has a fight lined up, but there aren't really many that currently stand out. I think there was one point in time where I would have said, with ease that the women's strawweights are like the best female division in the UFC, but now it's a little bit different. I feel like it's kind of died out now that Joanna's retired and others have gone. You look at it, I think Marina Rodriguez just obviously lost the other day, losing to Amanda Lemos, so she could be in there. Tisha Torres is still there. Amanda Hebas is still in the picture. I do think if Tatiana Suarez stuck around at that weight, and obviously she's injured all the time, I think she would have beaten them all. But there's nobody really who stands out. You got Mackenzie Dern, but again, not something. And she lost the last fight, but I still don't really know how well she fares against these the likes of Zhang Weili and that. So I don't know. I just don't think there's much excitement there. But the strawweight, I'll be honest, I think is the best weight in the female divisions in the UFC, and they'll probably be like a contender again in another few years. MMA is always evolving, and I think there'll be someone there. But at the moment, I think Whaley's. I think Rose was terrible in the last fight, but I do think her and Whaley, I think, are the two who I would say are above the rest. But we'll see. What I know Esparza beat her, but I still think Rose should have done a lot better in that fight. It was a weird fight. So, yeah, either way. But I think Whaley gets it done, and she's a 2-time champion. And then we move on to the big one, the main event. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. Could be billed as Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira 3, because as we all know, they fought in kickboxing back in the day, with Pereira winning the first one via unanimous decision. Also split decision, actually, I forget. But winning the first one by a decision, and then obviously KOing Adesanya in the rematch with a beautiful left hook. And yeah, this fight is one that I think a lot of people have been looking forward to since. I think it's been built since Pereira really came into the UFC. Like I said, obviously they fought back in the day on Glory of Heroes, the kickboxing promotion, and I think there's a few things to consider. First of all, I watched both fights back, and looking at the first fight, so Adesanya feels like he won. A lot of people feel like he won. To be honest, it could have gone either way. I gave the first round to Pereira in that fight, and then I gave the second to Adesanya, and I gave the third to Adesanya. But I could see a world in which you give Pereira the second round. To be honest, Pereira did very, very well in that fight. I think the reason he won the fight, I think Adesanya, I think, landed more volume and he was more active in the fight. But Pereira, the big shots seemed to come from Pereira, and I think that's sort of why the judges kind of swayed that way. But not robbery by any means, very close fight. But I could see an argument for Adesanya, but I could also definitely see an argument for Pereira. And then in the second fight, obviously with a knockout, Adesanya won the 2 rounds. He obviously got a didn't score a knockdown, obviously, but he landed enough shots for Pereira for the referee to give a standing count. And if you look at both fights, they both play out quite similar. Not to take away the knockout for a second, but Pereira in the first round, in the first fight, came out very aggressive. And I think there's some things aren't really noted in that fight, or in those fights that they fought each other. But I'll stop. So in terms of the first fight, Pereira started off very aggressive, came out very, very, not reckless, but landing a lot of hard shots. And at that point, I don't think he was that much into his kickboxing career, to be honest with you. But I think one thing about Pereira, he lands everything very hard, but you could kind of see in those two fights, it was very, very close in skill, to be honest with you. Adesanya was just looked a little bit slicker, but Pereira, it wasn't as if he couldn't touch him. You see a lot of Adesanya's fights recently in UFC, and guys can't get near him. That wasn't the case. Pereira was landing shots on him, and it's something to be said, kickboxing and MMA, the distances, the range is very, very different. And the narrative is that Adesanya is obviously a much different fighter than he was in the kickboxing fights, and that's true, but so was Pereira. Pereira became a lot better, and I think Pereira's almost looked at as a guy, because he's got knockout power, as a guy who's very, very, just throws big shots, but it's not the case. He's very, very smart, very methodical in there. If you look at one of his knockouts, I forget who he fought, but he threw the body kick on his opponent to almost move him into the range of the left hook, and he landed the left hook right after. Like, he knows, his brain is very, very good fighter IQ, and as a kickboxer, you know the distances are very, very subtle, and I think he does a lot of things, Pereira, which almost sometimes you look at and you think he's just landing big shots, but he doesn't just throw them. He thinks he's a very smart fighter, Pereira, and I think that's one reason why those first fights are competitive. You need to be a smart fighter to hang in there with Adesanya, and that's what you saw. A very, very close fight the first time around, and I think Pereira was doing very well. I think landing big shots, but Adesanya was just more active when it came to the second round. I think he kind of just stepped it up a bit, which is interesting because it's the one thing you don't really look at him at doing in the UFC. He doesn't land like a massive barrage and massive volume of shots. So it could be that maybe that version of Adesanya was better, or not better, was different than obviously this one, because he was more active then. Now he's a bit more methodical. So maybe he's a bit more nowadays. I don't know what the word would be. He's a bit more, because he's a champion now, he knows what to do, but sometimes that can go against you. Maybe because he was so reckless, it kind of suited his game to fight Pereira like that, but maybe now it doesn't suit Pereira in that same way. So it's a very, very interesting fight still. And then the second fight was quite similar, to be honest. The first round, like I said, was very similar, but one thing I noticed in the second kickboxing fight, Pereira was consistently looking for that left hook, and it got very, very close on occasions. And when I was watching it, I could kind of see why he knocked him out with it, because Adesanya was kind of just leaning away from the left hook, or he would just duck under it, or Pereira or Adesanya would maybe just move enough so maybe it would hit his shoulders instead. Like, he was getting close a few times, Pereira, and eventually you kind of see Adesanya got the standing 8 count against him in the second round, and then in the third round he tried to go a bit more aggressive, Adesanya, but then eventually got caught by the left hook, which Pereira did really well to set up. Adesanya he does this a lot in MMA as well, but he does a lot of sort of just leaning back out of the way of things, and because he's so long it works, but against some guys it doesn't work. And with Pereira, I think he kind of just got caught in the middle of an exchange, which I don't think he makes that same mistake this time, to be honest with you. One thing about it as well, between the second and the first fight, Adesanya fought more fights, but Pereira also was out with an injury, and the second fight, I think it was his first fight back from this injury, and Pereira took this fight on very short notice. So the fact that he was still able to knock Adesanya out and do it quite convincingly, well, not convincingly, but do it in that sort of way where he knocked him cold, shows you about the skill he possesses. And again, on short notice, we know it's not the same. And then if you look at the first fight, first fight was close, and like I said, people might give it to Adesanya, but it's a close either way, and he's better now, I'd say, Pereira, than he is back then. Obviously, back then, Pereira, that we talk about, was fighting in the, what was it called? I've completely forgot. What was the organisation called that he was fighting Adesanya in? It was the Glory of Heroes, is what Alex Pereira was fighting in, and But then naturally, as he kind of progressed his kickboxing career, he obviously fought in Glory, and a lot of people were into kickboxing and say that's where you kind of saw the best of him. That's where you saw him almost step up a level. But Alex Pereira truly is a fantastic kickboxer, and that is where my intrigue in this fight comes, because there's a lot of caveats. If you look at the first kickboxing fight they had, like I said, Pereira wasn't that much into his kickboxing journey, whereas Adesanya was a bit more into it, and yet he still won, and it was close. Second fight, he came off an injury. He was took on short notice, and yet still knocked him out. Pereira has improved exponentially, I think, since then, as has Adesanya. But the difference this time, obviously, as we know, in mixed martial arts, it's very different to kickboxing. There are no ropes in mixed martial arts. You have the cage. The gloves are smaller, which that's another thing. Pereira knocked him out in bigger gloves. Now the gloves are smaller, and it just makes you think Adesanya does get caught here and there. And it's just a very, very intriguing fight, to be honest. It's like Adesanya's almost final boss battle almost. Because if he beats him, I don't really see he has to go up in weight. There's nobody else for him, to be honest. And I think with Adesanya in this fight, he's got criticised the last few times for being boring. But one thing I say about Adesanya, his fights are only ever boring if the fighter who he's coming up against doesn't come to win. I like Jared Cannonier, but he didn't come to win. Neither did Whittaker. I know people thought Whittaker won. Whittaker did very good at certain stages in that fight, but it wasn't like that deep down belief that he went in there to take the belt from Adesanya. And you look at Vettori, the same. He's just been the same for quite a few of his fights, to be honest, and that's why he gets criticised for being boring. But he's doing what he needs to do. And one thing about Adesanya in this fight, which interests me, Adesanya has almost picked whenever Adesanya's come up against guys with big power. So the two guys who I think almost stick out the most for me are Paulo Costa and Yoel Romero. Both of those guys froze against Adesanya. I know in the first Romero fight you could go Adesanya's off front doing more, but to me he did what he needed to do as a champion. But Romero traditionally goes at people. You look at the Whittaker fight, he went at Robert Whittaker. You look at him at the Adesanya fight, he was stunned melodical and doing nothing, just shuffling. It didn't do anything. And it shows you the effect that Adesanya has. You look at Paulo Costa, did not do anything as well, landed a few kicks, but just got his leg kicked off and eventually just got picked off at range and got stopped. There wasn't that intent from those guys with the power. However, and because I think this is to do with the fact that he's fought him twice, I don't think Pereira will freeze against Adesanya. I think Pereira has deep down belief that he can beat him and knock him out again, as I believe that Adesanya has that. But there is something to be said about mentally the fact that Adesanya knows that this guy knocked him out cold the last time they met each other, and not many fighters get knocked out like that. There are a few knockouts that kind of stick out to me where I kind of feel like, even though they'll put on a good game, there'll be that little, not fear, but that almost caution that that this other guy can do damage. You look at Michael Bisping and Dan Henderson, another example. Yes, Bisping probably was talking a lot in the second fight, but he knew Henderson put him out badly in the first fight, and that threat will forever, that almost thought in his mind will always be there. It'll be the same with GSP and Matt Serra. You might see this in the Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards fight. You'll see it in some fighters where there's almost a deep down belief or knowledge that they know that this guy can knock him out because they've done it before. And I think you may see this with Adesanya. You may see him a bit cautious in this fight. I think you'll see Pereira really being more aggressive, landing shots, but I don't think he'll be reckless. I don't think he'll freeze against Adesanya. One thing to be said, the reason these guys don't stand with Adesanya because they haven't got the credentials, they haven't got the kickboxing credentials. Alex Pereira is an excellent kickboxer, and this is why his fight is so interesting. It isn't just because of the past, but Adesanya can stay at his range, kick people, jab them, and just do that for 5 rounds. I don't know if you can do that against Alex Pereira, or at least do it to the point how he's done in his last few fights where it's almost been comfortable for him. And look at the height and reach I want to look at here. They're the same height, and Adesanya's only got a 1 inch reach advantage over him. Adesanya usually has a superior reach over everybody, and not just by a bit, but quite a distance. And we saw with John Jones that whenever he went up against somebody who had a sort of similar reach against him, he struggled. You know, Gustafsson and Dominic Reyes are two examples of this. And I think, I don't know, this is a 50-50 fight. Honestly, it is a very, very close fight. Like I said, I just don't know if Adesanya will do what he does normally against Pereira, or do it where he will close to a victory. I think this will be a very, very hard fight for both of these guys. I could see it be a bit of a war, to be honest, where maybe Adesanya does almost throws back to the Calvin Gastelum fight and goes a bit very, very aggressive in there. Against the likes of Robert Whittaker, he's able to pick him off at range because I think he was just too long for Whittaker. Like I said, all the intangibles that I think happen with all these other fights, it doesn't really count for Pereira. You know, Pereira is 1 inch less than Adesanya. He's not that much in reach. Kanye didn't have the striking, neither did Vittori, to compete with him. Pereira did. Or Pereira does, I should say. And one thing that, and it's a joke, but people are almost saying that maybe Adesanya tries to grapple with him. Adesanya's grappling, I think, is quite underrated, especially his defensive game. And you saw against Calvin Gastelum, went for like a standing guillotine, went for a triangle at one point, so he has it there. But I just don't know if he'll do that against a guy who probably will be working the wall. And even so, if Pereira was new to MMA, yeah, or completely new, I mean, like this is his first fight, then yeah, it could work. But he's had some time, Pereira. He's had a few fights. Obviously fought Sean Strickland, knocked him out in his last fight, so he knows what it takes. And even so, even if Adesanya takes him down, I don't think it's enough for him to keep him there. So, an intriguing fight, and it is a pure 50-50 for me. And I say this a lot, but I genuinely mean it. It is. I could not pick. I've gone back and forth on this fight so many times. I was thinking yesterday Adesanya will get it. The week before I was thinking Pereira, Adesanya. It keeps going back and forth in my mind who I think will win this fight. But coming down to my prediction, and I'm really sort of trying to think about this, I don't think Adesanya can do, like I said, what he does to everybody and just pick him apart at range and leg kick him, because I think Pereira, one thing I should say about Pereira as well, in the first fight, did very well at checking a lot of Adesanya's kicks, and it kind of discouraged him at one point to taking them, and it's what Blachowicz did against him. Blachowicz was checking his kicks so much, I think that's why Adesanya said that he was tired at the end of it, because his legs were knackered, because obviously more and more you check, the more it takes out of you as well. And as we've seen with some checks, they can break your legs, so they're dangerous. And I think against a guy like Pereira, I don't think those leg kicks will be as effective as they have been in the past. He knows the distances now, Pereira, and I could see Pereira starting off very aggressive, but in terms of what he needs to do, Pereira, I think almost fighting his own game. But if you can drag Adesanya into a bit of a war, I think Adesanya has struggled, maybe it's the wrong word. Blachowicz makes up the grappling quite well against him, but against guys who are powerful, he is kind of a little bit hesitant, really. The only guy I think he wasn't hesitant against was Paulo Costa, and I think that's because he knew that Costa's striking was on the same level as him. But Costa, whilst he hits hard, has more volume. He has to hit you like 7, 8, 9 times until he finally gets you down. Romero has the ability to put you out cold, and he didn't really try to engage him that much, so it shows that he's respectful of people's power. However, when it comes to Pereira, you got a guy who has the kickboxing pedigree as well as same as Adesanya does, and you got a guy who I think knows you. And so for Adesanya, I do think, for Pereira even, I do think if you can make it a bit more aggressive in there, kick his legs, almost back him up against the octagon, I think especially if you can draw him into exchanges in the middle of the octagon, especially in the clinches and stuff, I think it really would help, because I just think Adesanya doesn't really get caught, but he's hittable, Adesanya. It's just about setting up the right traps to catch him with them. So I think for Pereira, just doing that, I think Adesanya does have a lot more movement as well because the octagon's big, so he can move on the outside. But I still feel with Pereira, I do think his best chance is knock him out in first 3, I would say, because I don't know how he'll do against Adesanya in a 5-round fight, which is very different, because I think the first one was 3 rounds, and I'm pretty sure the second one was supposed to be 3 rounds, but obviously he got knocked out before we saw the end of it. Yeah, I just think that's what Pereira should do. For Adesanya, I think being smart, I think going to the body, he did very well in the second fight with the knees to the body especially, so I think I'd commit to the body if I was Adesanya. I don't think just doing what you normally do is going to work. I think he knows that. That's why I do think he'll be very prepared for this one. But I just think you have to be very cautious of the power. And when a guy has power and when he has a kickboxing pedigree, it's a dangerous combination. And I do think Adesanya's done very well as a long reigning champion. I think he's been fantastic. I have predicted the only fight I kind of thought he'd lose was the Costa fight, and that was not really me using my brain. It was just me kind of going off an inkling, similar to what I've done a few times. Similar to what I'm doing actually with the Chandler and Poirier fight, and what I did in the Colby Compton and Masvidal fight, where I kind of had a feeling. In this fight, I don't think he's uneducated or not used my brain to think that Pereira will get this one done. But I think Adesanya's been a great champion. I think he's done well. However, I think Alex Pereira gets this one done, and I actually think he knocks Israel Adesanya out. I'm going to say in the first round. I feel like Adesanya will be doing good. I think he'll light him up. I think he'll catch him the few shots to the body, but I think what will happen is, like I said, the distance isn't that much. There isn't much between them. And what will happen is I think Adesanya will take a bad step. When I mean bad step, I don't mean his foot goes. I mean like he will wander into a range which I think he knows he shouldn't do. He'll try and exchange. I think he might try and be a bit aggressive. He wants to try and get one over this guy, and I think he'll get caught with that, with the left hook. I think he stumbles against the octagon. And then I think Pereira lands the right, and then I think whilst Adesanya's pressed against the octagon, and I think he just stops him, and I think Adesanya's gets TKO'd in this one. Remarkably close fight. Like I said, I might change my mind one day and be like Adesanya, but when I'm thinking about everything, I just think Pereira will get this one done. But I've said this many times, I'm never surprised in this sport. If Adesanya were to stop him in like the 4th or 5th round, I think would be the most likely outcome if Adesanya was to stop him. Because I think he can use his championship experience. Adesanya is more experienced at MMA. I think that is clearly the case, but I don't know. I think Potan, I think is what his name is, gets this one done. I think we have a new middleweight champion, but should be a good fight regardless at Madison Square Garden. An exciting fight, and one that I've been looking forward to for a while. Finally, we've got a good contender middleweight, and who knows? I think if Pereira wins, we'll probably have a rematch with those two, and it will definitely provide an interesting narrative. And a very, very big fight though. But just my my preview for UFC 281. I'll do a review after the fights are done. And yeah, until next time.